Thank you all. These little ones are the future.
The first scream echoed through the medical wing like tearing metal. Dr. Elian Voss froze mid-step, her datapad slipping from her fingers as the sound pierced every reinforced wall between her and the quarantine chamber. It was not a sound meant for human ears. It vibrated in the chest rather than the skull, raw and panicked, layered with a frequency that made warning lights flicker. Then came another scream, and another. The alien cubs had woken up. "Seal the corridor," a voice barked over the intercom. "Level 4 containment, now." Automated bulkheads slammed shut behind Elian as she spun around, her pulse racing. She had been expecting resistance, fear, confusion. She had not expected this. Inside the observation chamber, 4 juvenile predators, classified as ex-Kelth cubs, clawed at the transparent barrier separating them from the medical staff. Their bodies were small compared to adult specimens, but every movement radiated lethal potential. Razor talons scraped against composite glass rated to withstand plasma fire. And yet, they weren't attacking the doctors. They were reaching. Their glowing eyes tracked a single point in the hallway. Her. "Elian," Dr. Morek said sharply, stepping between her and the glass. "You need to leave, now." She didn't move. The cubs' cries intensified, overlapping into a deafening chorus that rattled instruments and sent technicians stumbling back. One cub slammed its head against the barrier hard enough to draw blood, dark, iridescent fluid streaking down its snout. "They're hurting themselves," Elian whispered. "They're dangerous," Morek snapped. "You knew the risk when you volunteered." Yes, she had known, but she hadn't known this. 3 days earlier, the cubs had been found in the ruins of an abandoned listening outpost on the edge of human-controlled space. Their pack had been slaughtered. By whom? No one knew. The cubs were dehydrated, injured, and barely alive. Standard protocol called for sedation and isolation. Elian had broken protocol. She had entered the enclosure alone. She remembered kneeling slowly, hands visible, heart hammering, every instinct screaming that she was about to die. Instead, the smallest cub had limped toward her and curled against her leg. Now, as armed security teams flooded the corridor and containment sirens wailed, Elian realized something terrifying. The cubs weren't afraid of the doctors. They were afraid of losing her. "Explain," Commander Hale demanded. Elian stood in the command center, flanked by armed guards and surrounded by holographic projections of the cubs' enclosure. The screams had not stopped. If anything, they had grown more desperate. "You were instructed to assist with observation only. Instead, you entered the habitat. You established physical contact. You bonded." "I stabilized them," Elian said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "They were dying. Their nervous systems were collapsing from trauma. Sedation alone wasn't working." "So you replaced it with emotional imprinting," Morek scoffed. Elian turned to him. "They're pack-bonded predators. Their biology requires proximity, touch, familiar presence. Removing that suddenly erodes dependency," Morek interrupted, "which is why you are being removed." The order had already been signed. Elian was to be transferred off-station for psychological evaluation. The cubs would be relocated to a high-security research facility. As the words settled over the room, another scream tore through the speakers. This one ended in a choking whine. A technician swallowed hard. Vitals spiking again. Elian stepped forward. "Let me go back in." "No," Hale said instantly. "They're not attacking," she insisted. "They're calling." "They're manipulating," Morek snapped. "Predators adopt, that's what they do." Elian shook her head. "You're wrong." Hale hesitated. "Doctor, if we allow this and something goes wrong, then I take full responsibility." Silence stretched. Then, reluctantly, Hale nodded. 5 minutes, no weapons. If they show aggression, we'll pull you out." The containment door hissed open. The moment Elian stepped inside, the screams stopped. The cubs froze, then surged toward her, surrounding her in a trembling, clawed mass. They pressed their heads against her legs, her torso, their tails curling protectively around her knees. One cub licked her hand with a rough sandpaper tongue. Another whined softly. Their heart rates stabilized almost instantly. Monitors across the command center lit up green. Morek stared in disbelief. "She's regulating them," a technician whispered. Elian slowly sat on the floor, letting the cubs pile against her. She rested her forehead against the largest one's brow. "I'm here," she murmured. Outside the enclosure, alarms faded into silence. For the first time since their rescue, the cubs slept. The decision sparked outrage across 3 sectors. Human scientists accused Elian of reckless emotional interference. Allied species questioned humanity's judgment. Military advisors warned of catastrophic risk if the cubs matured with a human as their primary bond. Elian listened to every argument. Then she returned to the enclosure. Days passed. The cubs healed faster than predicted. Their injuries closed, their stress hormones dropped to baseline. They learned quickly, observing Elian, mimicking her movements, responding to her voice. They followed her like shadows. But the breaking point came when High Council observers arrived. They watched from behind reinforced glass as Elian fed the cubs nutrient gel from her hands. "This cannot continue," Counselor Ref declared. "She has compromised the subjects." "They are not subjects," Elian said quietly. "They are children." Reth's eyes narrowed. "They are predators responsible for the deaths of thousands across the galaxy." Elian met his gaze. "So are we." The order was immediate. Remove the human. As security entered the enclosure, Elian rose slowly, heart pounding. "It's okay," she whispered to the cubs. "I'll be right back." She was lying, to them and to herself. The moment the guards touched her arms, the cubs reacted. They didn't attack. They screamed. The sound was unbearable, raw, broken, filled with terror. One cub threw itself at the guards, not to harm, but to cling. Another collapsed, shaking violently. Vital signs spiked. Containment walls cracked. "Get her back in there," someone shouted. Too late. The smallest cub stopped screaming. Its breathing slowed, then stopped. Elian broke free and dropped to her knees beside it, tears streaming down her face. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't." The cub gasped. Its heart restarted. The room fell silent. Every official present understood the truth at the same moment. The cubs weren't bonded to Elian. They were surviving through her. The ruling came 23 hours later. Dr. Elian Voss was no longer classified as a civilian researcher. She was designated TAC Anchor, a role created solely for her. The cubs were not relocated. They were granted protected status, and humanity, for the first time in galactic history, formally acknowledged something no species anticipated. Humans were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They were not the most advanced. But when a species had lost everything, when fear hollowed out instinct, when survival itself required trust, humans became home. Weeks later, Elian stood in an open habitat beneath an artificial sky. The cubs, stronger now, larger, played around her, nipping gently at her boots, chasing her laughter. A council observer watched from a distance. "They will grow into apex predators," he said. Elian smiled softly as one cub curled against her leg. "Yes," she agreed, "but they'll remember who stayed." The cub lifted its head and released a soft, contented sound. Not a scream. A call answered, and for the first time, the galaxy understood why the doctors had failed. They tried to take her away, but you don't separate a pack, especially not when a human is part of it.